My name is Laura Mitchell, and the worst message I ever received came while my 8-year-old daughter was lying in an ICU bed. The machines around her made a constant rhythm of soft beeps and mechanical breaths. Every sound felt like it was measuring the seconds of my life. 3 hours earlier, Emma had been laughing in the back seat of my car, complaining about math homework. Then the fever hit, 104 degrees. By midnight we were in the hospital, and by 2 in the morning they had moved her to the ICU. The doctor used words like infection, monitoring, and we're doing everything we can. If you've ever heard those words about your child, you know what they really mean. They mean sit down and wait while your heart breaks slowly. I sat beside Emma's bed holding her tiny hand, trying to ignore the fear crawling up my spine. At some point around 3:30 a.m., I opened my phone, not because I wanted to scroll, because I wanted someone in my family to ask a simple question. How is Emma? We had a family group chat. My mom, my dad, my younger brother Jason, and me. I had sent a message hours earlier. Emma's in the ICU with a high fever. Please pray. Then I waited. 5 hours passed. The chat stayed completely silent. No response. No, how is she? No, we're coming to the hospital. Just that empty gray screen. I told myself maybe they were asleep. Maybe they hadn't seen the message. But at 7:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A new notification popped up in the family chat. It was from my mom. For 1 second, I felt relief wash over me. Finally, I opened the message and read it twice, then a third time, because my brain refused to believe what my eyes were seeing. My mom had written, "Your brother could really use $7,000 for his honeymoon. You're doing well right now, right?" I stared at the screen while my daughter slept under hospital lights, and in that moment I realized something painful. The family chat hadn't been silent because they didn't see my message. It was silent because Emma wasn't the priority. Jason's honeymoon was. I didn't type a reply. I didn't send a question. I didn't even react with an emoji. I simply closed the chat and blocked my mother's number. And for the first time in my life, I cut my family off. But the story didn't end there, because the next morning my phone rang 6 times. It was my dad. I ignored every call until the 7th one, and when I finally answered, what he said made my blood run cold. The first time my dad called, I thought it was an accident. The second time, I knew it was N single quotes T.by. The third call, the phone buzzing on the small plastic table next to Emma's hospital bed felt like a mosquito whining in my ear. I silenced it, then it rang again, and again, 6 times in total, each time the same name, lighting up the screen. Dad? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My daughter was lying there with N4 in her tiny arm, her skin pale under the hospital lights. Every few minutes, a nurse walked in to check her temperature. All I could think about was the message my mom had sent. Your brother could really use $7,000 for his honeymoon. Not, how's Emma? Not, is she okay? Just money. Jason had always been like that. My younger brother was the golden child in our family. When he got a speeding ticket at 17, my parents paid it and laughed about boys being boys. When I got a parking ticket at 19, my dad told me it proved I was irresponsible. When Jason dropped out of college twice, my parents said he was finding himself. When I worked 2 jobs to pay my own tuition, my mom told people I was too independent for my own good. And now apparently, I was also the family bank. The phone started ringing again. Number 7. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Emma stirred slightly in the bed, and instinctively I squeezed her hand. Her fingers curled weakly around mine. That was when I realized something. If Emma woke up and asked where Grandma was, I wouldn't have an answer, because Grandma was busy planning Jason's honeymoon. The phone kept ringing. Finally, with a slow breath, I picked it up and answered. Laura, my father said immediately, his voice sharp with irritation. Why are you ignoring your mother? I looked at my daughter, then back at the phone. She asked me for money while Emma is in the ICU. I said quietly. There was a pause, a short one, the kind of pause someone makes when they're deciding how honest they want to be. Then my father sighed, not with concern, with annoyance. Oh, for heaven's sake, Laura, he said, don't make this into a big drama. I felt something inside my chest go very still. My granddaughter is sick, he continued, but Jason's wedding is in 3 weeks. Deposits have already been paid. My grip on the phone tightened. Dad, I said slowly, Emma is in the ICU. Yes. And we're all very concerned, he replied, quickly. Then he said the sentence I will never forget. We just thought you could help your brother. First, for a moment I couldn't even speak. I sat there listening to the machines beside my daughter's bed. Beep, 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 and suddenly I understood something I should have realized years ago. In my family, emergencies were measured differently. Jason's honeymoon was an emergency. My daughter's life apparently wasn't. I swallowed hard. Dad, I said quietly. I blocked Mom. The silence on the other end of the line was immediate. Then his voice turned cold. You did what? But what my father said next was even worse. You did what? My father's voice exploded through the phone loud enough that I had to pull it slightly away from my ear. I blocked Mom. I repeated quietly. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hospital monitor beside Emma's bed. Beep, beep, beep. Then my father exhaled sharply, the way he always did when he thought I was being unreasonable. Laura, you're overreacting, he said. Your mother was just asking for help. I looked at my daughter's small face, flushed from fever, her eyelashes damp with sweat. Dad, I said slowly. Emma is in the ICU. Yes, and we're all concerned, he replied again. But his tone had already shifted back to business. But Jason's wedding is coming up fast, and we already promised Emily's family the honeymoon would be covered. I blinked. You promised them? Of course, he said. It's important for appearances. That word landed like a stone in my stomach. Appearances. My daughter was hooked up to 4 lines and heart monitors. And my parents were worried about appearances. Dad, I said carefully. Why would you promise something like that if you didn't have the money? There was another pause, longer this time. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. Well, we assumed you'd help. I let out a quiet laugh, not because it was funny, because it was so predictable. You assumed, I repeated. Laura, don't start with that tone, he snapped. You've always been the responsible one. Jason's just getting started in life. Getting started. Jason was 32 years old. He had switched careers 5 times, quit 3 jobs, and somehow still lived in the condo my parents paid for. Meanwhile, I had been paying my own bills since I was 19, but in my parents' eyes, Jason was always the one who needed support, and I was always the one who could handle more. I rubbed my forehead, exhaustion pressing down on me. Dad, I said, I'm at the hospital. I haven't slept in 20 hours. My daughter is fighting a serious infection. Yes, he muttered impatiently, then his voice lowered. But this honeymoon situation is time sensitive. I stared at the phone like I had misheard him. Time sensitive. Emma shifted slightly in the bed, her tiny fingers curling around the hospital blanket. The machines continued their quiet rhythm beside her. Beep, beep, beep. And suddenly something inside me hardened. Dad, I said slowly. I'm not sending Jason 700. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. Then he laughed, a short, disbelieving laugh. Oh, Laura, he said, you don't really have a choice. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? I asked. Another pause. Then my father said the one sentence that made my blood run cold. Because we already told Jason you agreed to pay for it. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. You told Jason. I already agreed? Yes, my father said calmly, as if that detail should have been obvious. We didn't think it would be a problem. I felt a slow heat spread through my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Dad, I said quietly. I never said that. Well, you didn't say no, either, he replied. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it again. My daughter was still asleep beside me. The machines continued their steady rhythm. Beep, 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 and suddenly I realized something. That made my stomach twist. They hadn't just assumed I would pay. They had already spent the money in their minds. Jason already booked the resort. My father continued. It's non-refundable. I closed my eyes. Of course he had. Jason had always been like that. The kind of person who booked the luxury suite first and figured someone else would handle the bill later. And Emily's parents are very traditional, my father added. They expect the groom's family to cover certain things. We can't embarrass ourselves. There it was again. Embarrassment, appearances, reputation, all apparently more important than the little girl lying in the hospital bed next to me. Dad, I said slowly. Do you know what Emma's temperature was when we got here? He hesitated. No, 104. Silence. They moved her to the ICU at 2 in the morning. Another pause. Then he said something that made my chest go tight. Well, children get fevers. I didn't speak for several seconds, because in that moment, something finally clicked into place. It wasn't that my parents didn't understand how serious this was. It was that Jason had always mattered. More. Always. When we were kids, Jason got a new car for his 16th birthday. I got a lecture about responsibility. When Jason crashed that car 6 months later, my parents bought him another one. When I needed help with college tuition, my father told me, loans build character. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the way they said it. Like it was obvious. Like my role in the family had always been the same. Fix Jason's problems. I looked at Emma again. Her tiny chest rose and fell under the hospital blanket, and suddenly I felt something settle inside me, a decision. Dad, I said quietly, yes? I'm not paying for Jason's honeymoon. The reaction was immediate. You're being selfish. He snapped. Selfish. I actually laughed this time, a dry, tired laugh. My daughter is in the ICU, I said, and Jason wants a honeymoon in Maui. You're doing well financially, he shot back. This isn't a hardship for you. My grip tightened around the phone, because that sentence revealed something important, something my parents didn't realize. They thought they knew how much money I had. They thought they understood my life, but the truth was, they had no idea. And what my father said next proved it. Laura, he continued, his voice turning colder, if you don't help your brother with this, then maybe it's time we tell the rest of the family how ungrateful you've become. And that was the moment I realized something terrifying. My parents weren't just asking for money, they were threatening me. My father's words hung in the air like smoke. If you don't help your brother with this, then maybe it's time we tell the rest of the family how ungrateful you've become. I stared at the hospital floor tiles while the machines beside Emma continued their quiet rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. For years, that threat would have worked. My parents had always controlled the family narrative. A tea every holiday dinner, every birthday party, every reunion. My father loved to tell stories. Stories about how Jason was ambitious. Stories about how I was difficult, and if anyone questioned it, my mother would sigh softly and say the same sentence she'd been using for 20 years. Laura's always been a little dramatic. It was amazing how powerful a story could become if you repeated it long enough, but something was different now. Maybe it was the hospital, maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the fact that my daughter was lying in a bed fighting an infection, while my parents argued about a beach resort. Whatever it was, the fear I used to feel around them was gone. Dad, I said quietly, yes? Tell them whatever you want. The silence on the other end of the phone was immediate. I'm serious, I continued. You can call every relative in the family right now if you want. His voice hardened. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's predictable. Another pause. Then he lowered his voice. Laura, listen to me carefully. I waited. Jason already told Emily's parents the honeymoon was covered, he said. If this falls apart now, it's going to make the whole family look cheap. There it was again. Not worried, not concerned, just embarrassed. Dad, I said slowly, I don't care how it looks. You should. No, I replied quietly. I really shouldn't. Emma shifted slightly in the bed, and I instinctively reached out to adjust the blanket around her shoulders. Her skin still felt warm, too warm, and suddenly, the entire conversation felt surreal. My child was sick, and my father was negotiating vacation plans. Laura, he said after a moment, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not. Yes, you are. I exhaled slowly. Dad, the answer is no. The line went silent again. Then he spoke. But this time his voice was colder. You're forgetting something. What? Everything you have came from this family. I almost laughed, because that sentence was the biggest lie my parents had ever told. And the truth was, they believed it. They believed my career, my house, my savings, even the stability in my life, all existed because of them. But the reality was something very different, something they had never bothered to learn, because if they had, they would have known one simple fact. I wasn't the struggling daughter they thought I was, and the money they expected me to send Jason, $7,000, was nothing compared to what I had already spent on this family. But my father didn't know that, and what I said next made him go completely silent. Dad, I said quietly, do you remember the year you almost lost the house? Dad, I said quietly, do you remember the year you almost lost the house? The silence on the other end of the phone stretched longer this time. Finally he answered. What does that have to do with anything? I leaned back in the stiff hospital chair and watched Emma's chest rise and fall. Just answer the question. He sighed. Yes, I remember, he said impatiently. 2017 was a difficult year for everyone. Difficult. That was one way to describe it. What he meant was bankruptcy. His construction company had collapsed after 2 bad investments. Contractors weren't getting paid. The bank had sent multiple foreclosure notices. The big white house my parents loved showing off at Christmas parties, it was 3 weeks away from being taken by the bank. You remember the night you called me? I continued. Another pause. I called a lot of people that year, he said. I remember that. I replied, because no one else answered. His business partners disappeared. His golf friends stopped picking up. Even some relatives suddenly became very busy. But one person came. Me. You were crying. I said quietly. I was not crying. You were. He didn't argue this time. You told me the bank needed $38,000 within 10 days or they would start foreclosure proceedings. I could hear him breathing through the phone now, slow, uneasy, and he said, and I transferred the money. Silence, heavy silence. Emma shifted slightly in the bed, and the heart monitor chirped softly before settling back into its rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. You said that was a loan, my father replied. Finally, his tone had changed, not angry anymore. Careful, yes, I said, and I paid it back. I nodded slowly. After 2 years. Well, there you go, he said quickly. So what's the problem? I almost smiled, because that wasn't the whole story. Dad, I said softly, you remember the next year? What about it? The IRS audit. He didn't answer immediately, which told me everything. In 2018, my father's company had been investigated for tax discrepancies, nothing criminal, but enough penalties to nearly destroy what little remained of the business. You were short again. I continued, this time 1900. His voice dropped. Laura. And I paid that, too. He inhaled sharply. You said you were helping family, he replied. I was. Then, I looked at Emma again, her small hand resting against the blanket, her skin still too warm, and something inside me hardened even more. But here's the interesting part. I continued. What? You remember when Mom needed surgery 3 years ago? Yes, he said cautiously. Insurance didn't cover everything. Correct. The hospital bill was 11. More silence. Longer this time. Dad, I said quietly. Do you know how much money I've transferred to this family in the last 7 years? He didn't answer. Because I do. I looked down at the notes app on my phone. I had opened it earlier while Emma slept. Not because I planned this conversation, but because I needed to remind myself I wasn't crazy. The number was still there on the screen. 68. I said calmly. The words hung in the air between us, and for the first time since the conversation started, my father didn't interrupt, he didn't argue, he didn't accuse, he just went completely silent. Then finally he said something that made my stomach twist. Well, that's what families do. I closed my eyes, because even after hearing the number, he still didn't understand. But what he said next proved something worse, which is exactly why you should help your brother now. For a few seconds, I didn't respond, I just listened to the quiet hospital room, and my father breathing on the other end of the phone. Beep, beep, beep. Finally I said, very calmly, did you hear what I just told you? Yes, he replied, and your response is what families do. That's right. I rubbed my eyes. Dad, I have given this family $68,000. And we appreciate that, he said quickly, but there was no gratitude in his voice, only expectation. You're doing well now, he continued. It's not like this is going to hurt you financially. That sentence made something click in my head. Because he said it with complete confidence, like it was a fact, and that meant one thing. My parents had been talking about my finances, guessing, speculating, probably telling everyone in the family that I was some kind of quiet millionaire, but the truth was much simpler. I had worked for everything. I had no inheritance, no family help, just long nights, promotions, and a lot of sacrifices, the kind my parents had never noticed. Dad, I said slowly, how much money do you think I make? He hesitated. Enough. That answer told me everything. He had no idea, but he was still planning how to spend it. Jason called us last night, my father continued. He's already told Emily's parents about the honeymoon. It's important to him. I stared at the wall across the hospital room. There was a poster there showing cartoon sea animals, a smiling dolphin, a turtle wearing sunglasses. It was supposed to make sick kids feel comfortable. Right now it just made the room feel even more surreal. Dad, I said quietly. Yes? Did Jason ask about Emma? The pause was immediate. Then my father cleared his throat. Well, he's been busy with wedding planning. Of course he had. He'll send a message later, my father added quickly. I almost laughed, because I knew exactly how that would look. Jason would eventually send a text that said something like, hope she feels better. Then immediately follow it with, so about the honeymoon. That was how my family worked. Concern always came after the financial transaction. Laura, my father said after a moment, I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. Difficult. That word again. The same one my parents had used my entire life anytime I didn't quietly solve someone else's problem. Dad, I said calmly, I'm not being difficult. Yes, you are. No, I replied, I'm just finally saying no. Another long silence filled the line. Then his voice hardened. If you don't send the money, Jason is going to be humiliated. I looked down at Emma. Her breathing was steady now, but the 4-line tape to her small hand made my chest tighten. Dad, I said softly, My daughter is in intensive care, and your brother is about to get married. He said it like those two things were equal, like they belonged on the same scale, and in that moment I realized something. My father genuinely believed this was a reasonable request. But what he said next revealed the real problem. Jason already told Emily's parents the money was coming from you. My grip tightened on the phone. Why would he do that? I asked. Because, my father replied impatiently. That's what you've always done. That's what you've always done. My father said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like gravity, like the sun rising in the morning. Laura fixes the problem. Laura sends the money. Laura keeps the family comfortable. For a moment, I didn't say anything, because the truth was, he wasn't wrong. That was what I had always done. Every emergency, every crisis, every time Jason overspent, every time my parents got themselves into financial trouble, every time something embarrassing threatened the family image, they called me. And I handled it, quietly, without drama, without ever asking for recognition, until now. I looked down at Emma again. Her small hand was wrapped in medical tape where the 4-line entered her skin. She was only eight years old, and the people who were supposed to love her most hadn't even asked if she was okay. Dad, I said softly. Yes? You know what the doctor told me this morning? No, he said the infection could have spread to her bloodstream. My father didn't respond. She's stable right now, I continued. But they're still running tests. The room was silent except for the monitors. Beep, beep, beep. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Well, children are resilient. The words hit me harder than anything else he had said. Children are resilient. Not I'm sorry. Not we're worried. Just a polite way of saying, she'll probably be fine. I felt something inside my chest finally snap. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet final break. Dad, I said. Yes, I'm not sending the money. His voice turned sharp immediately. Laura, I mean it. You're being irrational. No, I replied calmly. I'm being finished. Silence. Then he tried a different tactic. Your mother is going to be very hurt by this. I almost smiled, because that sentence used to work on me. Guilt had always been my parents' favorite weapon, but today it felt strangely powerless. Dad, I said quietly, Mom asked me for $7,000 while her granddaughter was in the ICU. Another pause. You're twisting this, he muttered. No, I replied. I'm remembering it. The silence stretched longer this time. Then finally he spoke again. But his tone had changed. It wasn't angry anymore. It was cold. If you don't help your brother, he said slowly, don't expect us to defend you when the family finds out. I frowned. What does that mean? You know exactly what it means. I didn't, and that's what worried me, because my father had always been careful with his words, but the next sentence he said made my stomach drop. You might want to check the family group chat, he added. Then the line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone and stared at it. A second later, my screen lit up. 23 new messages, all from the family chat, and when I opened them, I realized my parents had already started telling everyone their version of the story.